Have you ever wondered what to do with prints that aren't quite as perfect as you'd like them to be? This week I'm going to be sharing a very simple idea that can revive your seconds, your prints that didn't quite work out. Hello, my name's Helen and welcome to my studio space. So this week I'm just going to be sharing a very simple idea of what you can do with your prints that didn't work out quite as well. So in the early stages of printing, and especially when you're using recycled materials, so you're wanting to print with cardboard like I do with cardboard or with Tetra Paks or with reclaimed plastics, the materials aren't quite as predictable as, say, lino or wood. So, I'm getting an increasing pile of prints that they're a little bit pale, or they haven't quite worked in one way or another, either because the paper has been too wet or too dry, or my inking isn't quite up to scratch. You can class prints as seconds, as not quite perfect prints for whatever reason. Are they failures? I'm not calling them failures, but they're not quite as sharp as you'd like them to be. So what can we do with them? Well, we can use them for collage or for collage fodder. We can cut them up and use them like that. But I'm just going to be sharing another idea. Let's paint them. Let's put some watercolour. Let's put some paint on them. I'm just going to be talking over while I'm painting a few of my prints. So these are some prints that I have already painted, and I really liked the way that they were looking, so I just thought I would have a go at doing some more. So these were from the cardboard plates that I did a few weeks ago, and the prints are okay, but some of them are a little bit washed out. And so I'm just having a think whether or not I can revive them a bit with some watercolour. So I've got my watercolour palette here. I've also got some gouache, as you can see on the paper palette there, which I have used on the vessel that you can see on the right hand side there. So I'm sticking to my favourite colours, so they tend to be the ochres, the umbers and burnt siennas with some blues. So I'm sticking to a limited palette as much as I can. With watercolour, it tends to go on, it looks a little bit dark when you put it on, but as it dries, it lightens. So I'm not worrying about going over the edges. I'm not colouring in as such. I'm just adding a little few dots of colour onto the print. Thing to remember with painting on top of prints is it only works if you have used oil-based ink to start off with. So if you're using a water-based ink, that probably will move again once it's really wet. So these are printed with either the Aqua or the Calico etching and Intaglio inks. So once they're dry, I can add water to them, add watercolour to them or gouache to them, and the print layer will remain stable. So I've just put a little bit of colour onto that one. I'm going to leave it to dry a little bit and just move on to the other ones. Before the development of colour printing, this would have been a technique that was used in publishing books. The illustrations would have been done with either woodcuts or copperplate illustrations, and sometimes they would have been hand-coloured after the printing process, like I'm doing here, obviously, with much more skill, but they would have been hand-coloured with either gouache or watercolour. And I really like this the quality that the watercolour adds to the plate here does give that antique-y sort of book plate feel. I think it's probably down to the tonal quality, overall tonal qualities of the print. So like I said, I'm tending to use watercolour or gouache. It could work with acrylic, but bear in mind that the acrylic is going to cover your print line a little bit more. But, watered down acrylic may work. Give it a go. I also choose to work gradually rather than putting a thick layer of paint on to start off with. I'm working on the basis that it's easier to add rather than to take away. Although you will see at a later stage that I did get to a stage, especially with this owl, where I'm having to take away, or I'm wanting to take away some of the colour. So I'm keeping to a limited palette and I'm working gradually. I'm also working on the basis that these prints are sort of seconds, so they're not ones that I would want to necessarily frame as they are. So I'm making good something that didn't quite make, that wasn't quite the finished result that I would have liked. So I'm making good. So, can you make it any worse? Of course you can make it worse. But does that matter? No. It's all fun, it's all play, it's all experiment. And at the end of the day, what have we got? We've got some paper with some marks on it, and you can add them to future paintings, tear them up, use them as texture or collage, as collage fodder. Got my Lamy pen out here, and this has got waterproof ink in it. So this is carbon ink. So when it's dry, it is stable. You can paint over it. And I'm just very, very carefully sort of almost dotting, just barely touching the paper, trying to strengthen those lines just a little bit. I don't want hard lines there, but just to darken them just a tad. Where the watercolour is still a little bit damp, it does soak a little bit darker. But I don't mind. I'm just strengthening up some of those lines. If you haven't got, like I've got, if you haven't got carbon ink, then you try a fine liner. There are waterproof fine liners. You could, even if you're not worried about it being water stable afterwards, if you're adding the detail on when you've finished, you could even try using a charcoal pencil, something just to match those lines a little bit more. Here you can see I've decided that I've put too much pigment on around this owl's eyes, so I'm just trying to ease it off just by washing my brush and trying to lift some of that pigment away. So like I said, it's easier to add rather than take away. So I'm trying to work a bit faster here just to dilute some of that pigment. I know it will dry a little bit lighter than what it is, but yeah, and that all looked a little bit too dark straight away for me. Too much pigment on there. So some of these little characters here, in fact, all the three little characters here are all from medieval either objects or creatures that are within medieval sort of tapestries or wall hangings. So I quite like using for reference and inspiration the illustrations that can be found on medieval pottery or medieval tapestries or wall hangings. I love that naive interpretation of what creatures are or were back in those early days. So yeah, they're a bit quirky. As you can see, I'm going backwards and forwards between the different prints, just letting one layer dry just a little bit before adding another layer. Paper I've printed on here is technically it's called watercolour paper. It was from a very budget shop here in the UK, and I won't be buying it again, put it that way. It was fine, but it's a very cheap watercolour paper. This would work on any paper that you print on. Obviously, if you're printing onto finer papers, lighter papers, the Japanese tissue paper, that sort of thing, then you're going to have to be a little bit more careful with how much pigment you put on, how much water you're putting on at one time. But if you can print on it, you can paint on it. So I'm debating here as to whether or not I want to put any background colour on, and I'm thinking, yeah, just give it a go, see what happens. So I tend to favour a cerulean blue or a phthalo blue. This is mainly cerulean. And I'm just putting a light wash of this on. Not an even wash, just a sort of a blobby hint of a colour. And I think this is just a fun way of doing something with prints that didn't quite work out. And if it's just a nice relaxing thing to do, and you don't do anything else with the prints other than this, then hey, that's a good thing too. But so it's just another way to revive your less than perfect prints. So the owl, I think I'm deciding to go a little bit darker, so I'm adding a little bit of ultramarine, I think, and a little bit of phthalo to that cerulean wash at the back there, just to deepen that blue a little bit more. So for this last little bottle form, I'm just very simply adding some burnt sienna to the shape of the vessel. And that's a little touch of raw sienna going in just to darken the inside. And I'm kind of just blotching pigment in. I want it to do its own thing. And that's me. So they've all got a little hint of colour on, and yeah. So that's the bird, and that's kind of where it came from. So as you can see, that's been changed quite a lot. I've darkened those lines. The teasels, yep, that's just had a hint of colour on the teasels. This is a little wool that's just been very simply coloured in. This vessel was just black, and so that's actually had gouache on it. Gouache is a bit more opaque, so that goes over the top of it. And there's my owl. Yeah. And you can see the definition on the middle flower in particular with that one. The simple bottle form vessel. And just as a final little thing, I decided that the teasel just needed a little bit more definition. So that watercolour is now dry, and I'm just going in again with my carbon ink in the Lamy pen, and just very lightly going over some of those details just to sharpen up those lines, just to give it a little bit more contrast. Like I say, you could easily just use any fine liner pen or even a charcoal pencil. It's what fits in with the lines of your print. And that's just giving a little bit more definition to those teasels. And that's me, that's my revived prints. So there you have it, a simple way to revive your prints that didn't quite work out the way you wanted them to. As always, thank you so much for watching and for all your likes. And if you find my content useful, then please subscribe. It does help the magic YouTube algorithm share this content with other people who may find it useful. So yeah, until next time, thanks again for watching. Bye for now.